From idea to execution, launching a startup company can ultimately lead to success or failure. On this edition of Orlando Sentinel Snapshot, we focus on the state of startups in Central Florida. I'm Kayla O'Brien with the Orlando Sentinel, reporting from Canvs, a nonprofit co-working space for tech startups in downtown Orlando. Join us as we explore Central Florida's startup culture and how we compare to other cities across the country. Next, making the jump from idea to prototype can come at a hefty cost, but 3D printing gives startups a less expensive option to turn their dreams into reality. Then, we talk with entrepreneurs taking their first steps towards establishing a business. And we dive into the world of startup investing and see how Orlando stacks up against other cities fighting for funds. Next, seasoned startup vets reflect on lessons learned from business setbacks and share how their missteps help propel them to the next level. Then, success comes in different forms. We take a look at how several local companies are measuring their achievements. But first, let's explore Central Florida's startup community and how we compare to the rest of the country. Joining me now is Paul Brinkman, Orlando Sentinel's senior business reporter. Paul, what is a startup? Because there's some confusion with that.
Right, well, they're obviously new companies, but there's a few other characteristics that define them. One is they want to grow big and fast. Two, they are trying to do something in an innovative way, a new concept. And three, they don't usually have their own revenue at first. They're relying on investment from either friends and family, sometimes themselves if they're bootstrapping, or venture capitalist investment.
So with that in mind, how long can a company be considered a startup?
So there's no real time limit. What I've heard is that if a company's been around for 10 years, that's probably not a startup anymore. So the first few years, generally, if there's no significant growth, they have to retool or try a new concept.
So how does Orlando rank in the startup world?
All right, so the Kauffman Foundation is the best metric for ranking cities and their startup activity, and they really haven't been kind to Orlando over the past few years. Among the top 40 metros, Orlando ranks in the bottom half for three major areas: startup activity, entrepreneurial or Main Street companies, and then also for high growth companies. And high growth companies is where the real weak spot is. We have startups here, but they don't tend to grow as big or fast as in other cities. We actually rank number 34 in that category out of 40 metro areas.
Are there any efforts to improve these standings?
Yeah, there are lots actually. In the last 3 years, there's been a lot of activity here. The first thing is Canvs, where we're sitting now, open downtown. This building was renovated and there's a lot of startup activity here now. Catalyst, another co-working space, opened downtown. Guidewell Health Innovation Center at Lake Nona started. And then recently, another businessman started a program called Tech and Beers, which is an incubator accelerator program.
So have these efforts produced any results yet?
Yes, they have, and Kauffman Foundation has noticed. On their ranking for startup activity last year, they moved Orlando up from number 33 to number 21, so that was a nice boost.
Now, what does Orlando have that other cities don't?
We actually have a lot of tech and engineering here that other cities would kill for, really. I mean, Disney itself has a lot of engineers. Electronic Arts has a huge game studio here, video games. We have the whole history of the Space Coast here and all the engineers that were associated with NASA. We have new space companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin moving here. We have a really strong health cluster here. We do have success stories here too. We had a tech company called Pentaho, which sold a few years ago for $500 million. So there are some really big exits and success stories happening here.
Paul Brinkman, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Making the leap into the startup world can be a risky move. Multiple studies show that 75% of startups will fail within the first few years. An innovative program called Starter Studio, which runs right here at Canvs, is aimed at entrepreneurs in the very first stages of their startup.
So I'm learning more about that market, which is something that I am.
Meetings like this are what it's all about.
We had all heard of these accelerators in New York, San Francisco, Y Combinator, Techstars, really helping out local entrepreneurs. And Orlando didn't have anything like that.
That's when Starter Studio was born. The free program accepts a small group of aspiring companies and helps accelerate them into full-fledged businesses in just 12 weeks.
In order to get in a Starter Studio, you have to be able to execute. It's not good enough just to have an idea. We usually have anywhere between 40 to 60 applicants for every class. We take them in 3 months what they might do on their own in 2 years.
All the companies are tech-based, but tackle a variety of needs. Launchable is an app development company and just started attracting clients about a month ago.
What we are creating right now is Alice, which is an educational tool to help kids read. It's pretty easy to start something up here and get it going as a comparison to like Silicon Valley. You're out there and you're swimming with like a whole bunch of sharks.
Everyone in the program works side by side out of Canvs.
I'm really competitive, so I'm thinking, oh, I gotta compete. How do I beat every person around me? And then we slowly realized it's not a competition, it's like how can we grow as a community?
Keeping the Orlando startup community growing is a challenge for the city.
We need to have more investment because that's one way we lose people certainly, is companies go elsewhere for investment. We need support not only of people here, but the local city and the county.
Some graduates here are finding success.
So we've graduated around 50 companies. Of those 50 companies, they all employ to this day somewhere around 100 full-time employees. They've made over $10 million in revenue, and they've been able to raise over $5 million altogether.
One of those graduates is Kristen Wiley of Statosphere.
Statosphere is a company that connects brands with micro-influencers. You say, yes, I want this cream in exchange for doing an Instagram post and a blog mention, and then I box it up and ship it to them all together. It's just been such a crazy whirlwind of moving way quicker than I ever thought it would. If I hadn't plugged myself into this thriving, tech community, I wouldn't be moving this quickly.
She's got some advice for people thinking about getting started.
I talk to a lot of people who have an idea, but I think they are afraid to take the jump. And there's so many resources out there, especially in Orlando. And if there's any time to start a business, I think it's now, because barrier to entry is just a lot lower than it used to be.
But Greg has a warning for aspiring entrepreneurs.
You build a startup because you're really passionate about something, and it's so much so, more than other people, that you want just to make a living solving the problems that you love solving. Who cares if you make a ton of money? If you can get paid to do what you love, that's success.
Prototyping can pose some of the biggest challenges to new companies. Traditional manufacturing can be expensive for small businesses, but 3D printing offers a more economical way for startups to manufacture prototypes.
While 3D printing may seem to have appeared into the mainstream out of thin air, much like something it printed, that's not the case. The technology was first introduced in the 1980s. However, within the past decade, the technology has grown in popularity and rapidly evolved to include the ability to print multiple materials.
There's powder printers, there's resin printers, bronze mixed in, there's wood. I mean, every day it seems like they're coming out with something new.
And like most technology, as it develops, the price has decreased.
Nowadays, the printers are coming down $4,000 a machine, $3,000 a machine, and the machines run 24 hours a day. You're able to pass those cost savings on to the customer. So what was once a $800 3D print is now a $40 3D print.
From a startup standpoint, this price decrease means pretty much anyone with an idea like this can turn it into this.
What's happened more recently with the lean startup methodology and the ability to do rapid prototyping and so-called minimum viable product is that you can get some minimal version of the product so you can assess ideas to change and iterate on that idea via customer feedbacks.
It's affordable enough that they didn't sink their whole life savings into one idea, that they're able to do 4, 5, 6 ideas and that one takes off.
Now prototyping can be accomplished from storefront 3D printing shops, much like Solid Print 3D in Winter Garden, that will help you take an idea from napkin sketch to fully working prototype, to maker spaces like Factor in Orlando that has the technology available for its members of its shared workshop to tinker and flesh out their ideas.
Because to outfit an entire warehouse of $150,000 to $250,000 worth of tools, it's costly, and it's really an impediment to kind of starting up. The whole concept of rapid prototyping is truly rapid now. I mean, once you start to learn the modeling aspects of it, you're able to kind of refine your tooling without having to buy a cast of something. So before you would design and spend lots of money to go cast something, and you'd spend $30,000 to $50,000, and hopefully it all kind of worked out, and you wouldn't be able to tinker along the process.
For Factor member Sean Kelly, this idea was an action camera mount he was developing.
I kind of did immediately think of, hey, this could be something I can throw on Kickstarter or whatever, but it was more of a like, hey, let me see if I can do this. So I did everything myself.
While he ultimately would abandon the project, the process allowed him to work out his idea at a minimal loss.
I feel like I got a huge education for that, and about the 8 months to a year that I was kind of playing with it and working on it.
Whether it's a closed chapter or the launching point of making a multi-million-dollar business, 3D printing has made the process of prototyping a much less rocky and uncertain one.
For an average guy to just say, I have an idea, and all he has to do is walk into a shop and draw on a board for 15 seconds until I get the idea, it's done. It's modeled, we've prototyped it, we've tested the theory to make sure it's going to work. With 3D printing, really your imagination is the limit.
Turning an idea into a profitable business takes more than determination and grit. It takes money. Orlando Sentinel business reporter Marco Santana takes us into the world of startup investing.
Crowdsourcing, bootstrapping, seed funding. There's many terms startup CEOs need to know before getting their business off the ground.
The opportunity to raise money is as strong here as anywhere else, and the opportunity to invest here is as good as anywhere else.
Richard LeCursey is the founder of Envelo, an early-stage investment company in Winter Park.
I'm encouraged by Orlando. It's not the biggest venture community, let's say, in the state of Florida, but Orlando's got a real, it's coming fast.
LeCursey says what he's looking for is simple.
We want entrepreneurs who are looking for a return on their investment. If they're looking for our money and they're not looking for a return on investment, there's a real disconnect. We're not just making an investment and then we're going out to play golf and give us a call in a year and tell us how it's worked out.
But how does Orlando compare to other cities trying to grow a similar startup culture?
What you're hearing from entrepreneurs is that the talent leaves because they can't be funded here. And I would argue you can get a company funded in Orlando just as easy as you can in Silicon Valley or New York or Boston. It's really tough to tell somebody when their baby's ugly. And that's sometimes what they need to hear, that this isn't going to work. But the money is here, the talent is here to do it, and it can work here. You don't have to go somewhere else.
Officials with the Florida Angel Nexus, which connects startups to investors, agree.
Orlando is definitely on the rise. It's a very exciting time to be in Florida in general. We've had a solid foundation of technology for a very long time, thanks to NASA and defense contracting. Now it's just helping put the first steps together for an entrepreneur.
Even though Orlando still has a long way to go, competition remains stiff.
We're working with 10 to 20 companies a week, so it's tough for us to really get into the trenches with every idea that comes to us.
And both entrepreneurs and investors hope they have the right recipe for success.
Definitely, given the ingredients that we have here in Central Florida, really strong and rising for investors.
With some studies showing startup failure rates close to 90%, the Central Florida startup community is embracing their missteps in hopes they can help others learn from their mistakes.
H2O Overdrive, failure. World Extreme Fighting, ultimately a failure. Digibelly, success, but ultimately a failure. Digibelly was an exciting time for me. I was, a young 20-something. The dot-com boom was going on. We started ramping really fast, and then we turned on sales, and we had hundreds of customers within the first month or two. But during this time, the investment wasn't happening. And there was an excuse, and there was a delay, and another excuse, and another delay. The lesson here is the money isn't in the bank until the money's in the bank. And that's the mistake that I made.
But soon after the company went bankrupt, his entrepreneurial spirit was starting up again.
A failure is not the end of the world unless you stop. And so even with what was a pretty devastating period in my life when Digibelly went bankrupt, and I went bankrupt personally for the second time, I realized it wasn't over. It was just another phase, and this one didn't work out, but maybe the next one would.
Eric is not the only entrepreneur who is surprisingly open about their past business failures. The Orlando startup community recently met at Catalyst to be more transparent about the reality of running a successful business.
Take your time, take it slow, go get market validation for your product, and the market will dictate kind of how your company will continue to grow.
The goal of events like these are to help future startups. Eric says his best advice didn't come from a former CEO or a startup savant.
And my dad said this to me: if I had been brave enough and had the balls to do what you're doing when I was young, I would have. And so don't ever listen to anybody else, and just go do it.
Success can be measured in different ways, from trendy stationery to tailgate games to an app that allows parents to monitor their child during surgery. We take a look at 3 local companies and how they're achieving their goals.
Don't be afraid to make mistakes or take risks, because you can sit there behind closed doors and come up with the greatest business plan or the greatest theory, but everybody's got a plan until they're punched in the face.
For Scott Sims, that first risk in starting his company Victory Tailgate was a maxed out credit card used to buy the supplies to build his first cornhole board.
This one I hand painted in my garage the first time. It took me about 2 days to build and 2 days to paint.
He would sell it on eBay, take the earnings, build 2, sell those, and from there, it just kept going.
Oh, I woke up one day, we were selling 20 sets, the next day we were selling 40, the next day we were selling 100. The great analogy is trying to change all 4 tires while you're still going 120 miles an hour.
Surging forward, Victory Tailgate made over 200,000 boards last year.
We basically doubled in size every year for the first 7 years.
Persistence in convincing colleges and teams his direct consumer approach was an untapped market was key.
I had to go around and basically beg to every school to get these licenses and tell them why we're different.
He's also a firm believer that success comes from surrounding oneself with the right people. One of those individuals for him is Victory Tailgate COO Sheila Jimenez.
We brought in a couple of clients that really wanted us to create apparel-based items.
With her expertise creating custom apparel, Victory Tailgate has now branched its focus in other directions.
So we took the risk on them, purchased the equipment, and then realized there's some synergies with what we're doing.
The fact that we already have generated our own customer base and now we can offer them more products, whether a small liberal arts college or the Pittsburgh Steelers.
After building a company with nearly $30 million in sales last year, Sims offers this piece of advice for up-and-coming startups.
Embrace mistakes. Don't try to hide it. Don't be afraid, because some of the stuff we've done has taken 2 years of mistakes, but I like that because that means that's that much harder for the next person to do.
This same philosophy has helped launch another Central Florida startup developed by pediatric cardiac anesthesiologist at Arnold Palmer Hospital.
You can get bogged down in the minutia of it's not ready yet, it's not baked enough, it's not perfect. I can't tell you how many conversations we had where we literally said, we've got to get this out there.
What they felt needed to be out there was what would become their app, Ease. Working from an operating room, they saw a gap in how families received information on their loved ones while they were in their care. Now, their app, Ease, allows families to get real-time updates directly to their phone while the doctors and nurses are working on their loved ones in the operating room.
Why should you wait 4 hours until the surgery's ended to hear anything? It's such a photogenic generation as well, with Facebook and Instagram and everything. But also, it opens a window to the operating room and it creates a lot of trust.
Now their app is being used by over 20 hospitals nationwide.
I think what worked for us is to start small. We had a controlled environment in the peds cardiac operating rooms, and we started small there. We proved it. The surgeons were in some ways learning how to communicate through this way, and then that spread rather virally to other operating rooms.
For them, the real measure of success has been providing that added trust between doctors and the families of patients while they have their loved ones in their care.
We'll land a new hospital and we'll get excited, but then immediately the conversation turns to, well, what about this one? And what about that one? Learning to appreciate the little successes has been something that we've learned to do, but also we are passionate about what Ease does.
Passion is also one of the key components to success for Winter Park-based Rifle Paper Company.
We used to say in the beginning, you know, one of our secret weapons was how hard we were willing to work and how many hours we were willing to put in. And I think that comes from loving what we were doing and being passionate about it and believing in it.
What the couple believed in is that Anna's illustration and design work she was doing was something special.
She realized there was a lot of demand for the style she was doing. Then we started the brand like 8 months later.
And things just started clicking. We really had nowhere to go but up. We didn't have like jobs to quit.
And after launching in 2008, up is exactly where the brand went.
I think when we hit live on the website and we saw the orders coming in, that was like the there's no turning back moment.
We didn't know how to do anything. We had no experience, no mentors really. Every single challenge was just sort of figure it out as you go, I guess.
What the couple was figuring out was growing their company that now has over 200 employees and over 20 million in sales last year.
For the first few years, we were sort of in this days of just making it work and keeping our head above water. I feel like the last couple of years, we've had more of a footing and really focus on growing and solving problems.
And while the company has continued to grow, there has been one constant for the couple during every phase of their journey to success.
You're essentially reinventing the wheel every few months, every 6 months or whatever, which is exhausting, but fun.
As entrepreneurship continues to become more accessible, more people can pursue their passion for business. Unfortunately, that means more competition, but Central Florida continues to define its global startup presence. The next success story could be right around the corner. Join us next time on Orlando Sentinel Snapshot as we switch the focus to opioid abuse. We'll explore how heroin is affecting lives in Central Florida as latest records show deaths from the drug increased 108%.